Hi, my name is Luke. I am on the NPM team at GitHub. And this is my talk called How the NPM team uses GitHub to manage open source projects. So, on the NPM team, we have a lot of open source stuff. So, a little about myself first. That's me. I'm Luke. NPM team at GitHub, like I said, I came in from Mesa, Arizona. There's a picture I took there in the background, and you need to contact me. It's pretty much my name at all the socials, so can't mess it up. I've been on the NPM team for a little, like 2.5 years. The majority of that time being working on the NPM CLI, which is all open source, and kind of focusing on our open source topics. We are the NPM team. I'm part of that. And overall, this is what we are responsible for when it comes to open source stuff. We have 83 packages spread across 70 repos. So we have some mono repos, some packages that are...
Can you check if your mic's on for me?
Sorry, it was not. Turned it right off before I started. So some monorepo stuff, some polyrepo stuff, some standalone things, probably something you've used if you've installed JavaScript. I ran the numbers last night. We did 430 releases last year of public open source stuff. That seemed like a lot. I ran the numbers multiple times because like that doesn't seem right. But it was a little over one a day for the last 365 days. And then overall, those packages amount to 4.3 billion monthly registry downloads, which still is scary to me, seeing that number because I published some of those things. So first time I did that, it didn't feel right. And then also the registry, the website, that's another talk that maybe one of my teammates can give another time. What do we see as our open source responsibilities on the NPM team? So we do releases of the CLI. We try to do those regularly, either weekly or bi-weekly, so we have a regular cadence for those. All the other dependencies we release kind of as needed. We go through all of our issues, PRs. We're currently prioritizing PRs over issues because we can't get to it all, as well as documentation. We work with a security team internally who triages bug bounties, and then we fix those. We're also responsible for our own integration into Node Core, so testing, making sure we support everything there, as well as backporting features or security fixes to our supported release lines. And then lastly, I kind of see as the most important, we see ourselves as stewards of the community, where we want to be, if we have a solution to something open source, we want to make sure that, it's something we can share with people, and, even if they just go spelunking through our code base, we are confident in the code that we ship. So all of that just kind of sits under this big open source umbrella. If I say we're responsible for our open source, kind of that's what I mean. And so everything we do is open source. This is, obviously you can't see our private repos, but I can. So if I do a search for them, you could see that if it's part of the NPM CLI, it is public. So everything is, even our status board is public. So this is our status board that we do to keep track of all of that open source stuff I just mentioned, make sure we're on track of keeping on top of all of our open source responsibilities. This is like the website version of our status board. If you click that link and go to the actual status board, it's a GitHub repo that has kind of our backlog and roadmap as well in there. So when I say it's all open, it really is. We have people who would just kind of watch our roadmap and backlog, and when we kind of create issues planning for the future, people will chime in. So that's one of the really nice things we get from open source. And so we want to be responsible for open source that scales. So what do I mean by that? One way was we wanted to scale up to the 4.3 billion monthly downloads number I mentioned before. So those are our, I think, top 10, can't count right now, but 10 or 11 by monthly downloads. A lot of those are used to power both the CLI and the registry. So Like I mentioned before, I'm not the expert in the registry scaling, but I do know that we want our open source, the stuff we open source, to be able to be used at scale. And then, but that's, the primary reason for my talk is not to talk about how we scale the registry. It's that we want our open source to scale down to our team size. So this is names redacted to protect the innocent, but this is our current open source CLI team at GitHub. That's me, somewhere in the middle there. So we want all of our open source solutions to scale down to that team size to enable us to support, the other scale, the 4.3 billion monthly downloads. So we also want to make sure that we're doing open source that we can share. So obviously open source is inherently shareable. Everything we do is public. You can grab it, download it, use it. It's published to the registry. You can NPM install it. But we want to hold ourselves to a certain standard that we feel like everything, something we're proud of sharing, and then also, since we use it ourselves, like meets our standards. So this is the latest thing that we published. This is npm CLI/agent. This is our new HTTP agent for the CLI. And it will also probably be used in some registry stuff as well. So this is just an example of the latest release that we did. And I think the last time I gave this talk, we had just recently open sourced version 1. We're on 2.2 now, so already made one breaking change. Here's an example using npm query of if I look through the CLI code and look for npm CLI/agent, I can see that it is in make fetch happen, which is another one of our libraries. And then if I look at make fetch happen, I can see that it's in our SigStore code, our Tough.js code, as well as Node GYP, which are all dependencies that we don't maintain, at least not directly. I am a maintainer of Node GYP, and the SigStore and Tough.js stuff are run partially by some security folks at GitHub as well. But when I mean that we can share it, it's something that if we publish it, we want it to then be able to be used by our dependencies as well. So when we publish something to open source, it doesn't just mean that we want just to use it ourselves. We want everyone to be able to use it. And then we also want to make sure that we can support all of this, which is, I think, the hardest part of open source. Writing the code is easy compared to support. But obviously, as I've mentioned, that's a lot of stuff that we are supporting. One example of ways that we do want to support it is backports for CVEs. So this is a screenshot of Semver's NPM page. And as you can see, there's 3 supported release lines of Semver right now, 5, 6, and 7. And those account for around 150 million downloads a week. Semver gets around 1.2 billion downloads a month of that 4.3. So 3 highly used release lines. Some of those are very old. And so we fixed a RDOS CVE, I believe in July, and we initially patched it in just version 7, which was the easy part, and then kind of doing the fixes, backporting to 5 and 6 were difficult. But we did end up backporting all of those, but the problems we ran into were like, I think the 5 and 6 release lines had commits that the releases were based off that were like no longer in our repo. They were from some fork somewhere that someone had deleted. We could still access the commit, but we weren't we initially didn't know where to look for it. We also, once we found the code, we weren't able to test it properly. The dependencies in that version didn't work to test it in versions of Node that we supported. We also needed to figure out what version of Node we wanted to support in, because if we publish something, we want to have user confidence and make sure, we use this ourselves, so we want to make sure that we're confident in how it works. So all of those were decisions we had to make to just even figure out how to backport this code. And so taking a step back for 1 second, I'm going to get into more how we made those CVE fixes and kind of the tooling that we had in place to do that. But if this is something we can't support, we like to deprecate it. We have definitely made solutions to things which were no longer the best option. One is we had our own CI detection library. I'm not sure if anyone knows this, but CI, there's a lot of new providers coming every day, it seems. And so maintaining a list of all known CI providers was not something, was maybe something that the team used to be good at. It was not something that we were good at anymore. And so there already existed a better community solution for this. And so we deprecated ours and moved to using this new one. And we were also lucky enough to have one of our users point this out to us in an issue to say like, hey, I saw that you're using this other version. Do you want to deprecate this? And we're like, yes, we do. Thank you so much. So if you're lucky, your users will point this stuff out to you. And so now we use a better maintained, it works better, and our users get better CI detection as part of running NPM in CI. And if we can't deprecate it, like if it's something we still actively use, and we are the only ones who make a version of this, but we're no longer like the domain experts in it, we want to be able to find a good home for it. So recently, I was wondering how to capture this in a screenshot, but if you look closely, this is looking at 3 different NPM repos and using the GitHub API to get their current location. And as you can see, they all turn a 301 pointing back to Isaac, who is the creator and inventor of NPM originally. But Node tar is one good example of a tar implementation written completely in JavaScript that is one of the backbones of the NPM CLI. And he is the domain expert in that, pretty much wrote it completely from scratch. I've shipped a few one-line bug fixes to it. So when he didn't actually want this one back. We asked him to take it, and he graciously accepted. And now it's in much better hands. And the NPM CLI will still continue to use it. We're not going to fork it and make our own Node tar library. And if we need features in it, well, we know who to go ask. And then we want to make sure that, so kind of like another umbrella is that we have open source that inspires user confidence when they're using this stuff. So everything I've mentioned so far is a lot of responsibility. And so now I'm going to go through kind of how we make sure that we inspire that user confidence. As I mentioned so far, like one of all those projects we have, we want to make sure everything fits, is either deprecated or, we don't use it anymore. It'll still remain open source. We might archive the code on GitHub just as another signal that we're no longer maintaining it, but it's free to use forever. We're not going to delete it, or we're actively supporting it, meaning we're going to keep it up to date with node versions, security fixes. We'll accept feature requests, pull request issues, respond to bugs, support in issues as well. And then for Semver, for those are currently our only 2 backported release lines of any library where we just only do CVE fixes for those. But since that was actually a new thing for us this year that we found when doing those CVEs, where we couldn't just patch the latest version. We needed to patch the last 2 versions because the long tail of package locks is long. A lot of people are using those old versions and probably will not update for a long time, if ever. So with a large open source portfolio like this, it's possible that things will fall through the cracks. It wasn't possible, it was inevitable for us. We had many things fall through the cracks. Like I mentioned, commits that weren't part of our forks, or that were only part of forks. We also had code that was published to the registry that wasn't on GitHub, that we kind of had to pull down from the registry and deconstruct to see what should be in source. The opposite was true. There was code on GitHub that pointed to a release that never made it to the registry. We don't know how that happened. This is all, NPM's been around for over a decade now and been open source the entire time. So in taking over this portfolio, we found, all sorts of interesting things. I once published a version of the CLI that bundled its own dependencies, but one of those bundled dependencies didn't get published on its own, which broke some other people's tooling, which they very quickly overnight let me know about. The next morning, I was able to fix it. We've had aborted releases, repos that we had created that were like, hey, this is a good idea, but that we never published. Kind of like everything that I just mentioned, the opposite of that. Like those were not inspiring user confidence. I'm sure as I'm telling you this, it's not confidence inspiring in our team, but I'll get to the good part now. So here's some, acronym buzzword type of things that I came up with for this talk about how we accomplish this stuff. So we have patterns that we like to apply to everything. Then we like to automate those patterns, and then as a backup, kind of have our own tooling that we can run to make sure everything is in good shape. And so being from GitHub, a PAT is a personal access token, so that's not a good acronym for this. Don't use this acronym. This is not a security talk. So as for patterns go, we used to use Make. Now we use our own tool, MPX. But we want to make sure that all of our repos look the same and act the same. For us, this goes down to directory, file structure, the names of stuff, our linting configs, the linting dependencies we use, code formatters, CI workflows. I'm reading off a list now that I can't memorize. Change log, the format of our change logs, the location of our change logs, the same issue labels, commit conventions, kind of all this stuff is the same across all of our repos. And when I say that we want to inspire user confidence, kind of this is what I mean. We've had people come to repos before. Maybe they've submitted a PR somewhere and come submit a PR at a new repo, and CI doesn't run, or their tests don't pass because they're different in some way. So, that's not very user confidence inspiring or contributor confidence inspiring if they're doing that and then blocked on, getting their PR accepted because CI, we've all been hit by CI not working, the same as we thought it would. It gets even worse if you're not even sure what CI is in place. And so one way that we accomplish this is to try to take any differences across repos and abstract them out to like the smallest surface area that we can find. So obviously, everything I've mentioned, the easiest way to do that is just make everything the exact same, which is not always possible. Our code is different for a reason. And so in this case, this is one of the backported release lines of Semver. I believe this is v6. And so we have a configuration file called template OSS. That's kind of our internal, or it's not internal, it's public, but that's one of the open source things that I'm pretty sure we're the only ones that use it outside of a handful of other known people. So this is our config version of just setting the old node version that we want v6 to run in. And that means we run, that's the version we test in, and it's also the version we support. So that's used to set the supported versions and then CI as well. So we only had to change it in one place. If you scroll up from this file, there's like a big long comment about, that's really boring, about how I picked this node version. But the nice thing is that it's only in one place. If someone finds a flaw in my logic of how I picked this node version, we can update the comment and just pick a new one, and CI will pick up the rest. Contributors, when they submit a PR to this line, they don't have to worry about specifically testing in node 6, which nobody should do. Don't test your code in node 6. But for something like Semver version 6, which still gets maybe like 250 million monthly downloads, it's something that we had to do, unfortunately. I didn't want to do this at first. That's why we released v7 first, and then 3 days later did the backport to v6, is because it took a while to figure this out. So the other way that we accomplish this, all the things I've mentioned, is trying to make adopting these patterns automatic. Another big push for us over the last year was auto-publishing everything. So we used to have all the CI set up, everything working, and then a developer had to get out their laptop, pull down the latest code, and type npm publish. And we did that because of access tokens. We didn't want them to live anywhere that they didn't need to, as team members can attest to. So we didn't want to have personal access tokens in CI anywhere. That was kind of a hard rule for us, is personal tokens don't belong in CI at all. So we had, developers had to check it out locally, which just added another point of failure for this stuff. So what we did is we had auto-publish and this is kind of like what I talked about, is abstracting to the smallest surface area. So we added auto-publish via this one flag to all of our repos. Behind this flag is like months and months of work of testing this stuff, as well as a registry feature that the registry team implemented to get granular access tokens that could be scoped to a single repo. and scoped for a set amount of time. So kind of everything I talk about, like I'm talking about abstracting it, but there's, it's to encapsulate the months and months of hard work that other teams are doing as well. And then, so that was an example of a pattern that that one didn't take that much time to implement. We just set a flag of publish true, and then CI runs it with, a trusted token, and that works. But some patterns are not, a simple flag like that. I'm thinking of converting a repo from JavaScript to TypeScript, which is something we recently started doing, recently as in yesterday. I wrote one on the plane because talk-driven development. I wanted to see how it would work. So some of these screenshots are literally from yesterday that I wrote to see how, kind of putting my talk to the test to see if what I was writing was true. So, that's a very time-intensive process, JavaScript to TypeScript, as you might know. It's a different language. There's a lot of different constraints. It's not that easy. So we've come up with what we call status board-driven development. So we might add, TypeScript isn't going to be something that is a hard requirement for all our repos. Stuff like code coverage and linting is. So in the past, we've added a column to our status board. It gets updated with the state of all the repos. And then we kind of just burn it down slowly. And then this is an example of a pull request where I got to remove a bunch of columns, testing in node versions, and making sure that all of our repos were on the latest version of our templating library, which was probably a year-long process. So making status board-driven development like this was a big milestone for our team is removing those columns. So kind of like when I talked about converting to TypeScript, that's something that we like to call automating our automations. And so here's kind of like an example of the life cycle of adopting a new pattern across all of our repos. So this is a library called, is it in the screenshot? It's called Read. I think it's somewhere over 100 million monthly downloads. Not the most, but not the least either. It's only one file. It's pretty small code base, but used a lot, and there's a lot of weird edge cases and options and streams that you need to make sure you mute and unmute at the right time. And we use it for prompting user input on the command line, reading it, and then doing something with that. And so here's a draft pull request that I created yesterday that converts it to TypeScript, uses a bunch of new tools that will help with that. TypeScript in particular, but also a new version of a testing library which runs TypeScript automatically, and a new version of a tool, TSHY, which stands for TypeScript Hybrid, I think TypeScript Hybrid, which does dual export ESM and CJS, which is another thing we've been wanting to do is start publishing ESM stuff. But we don't want to just do that in one place and say this one package is ESM. By the way, if you go to that package, make sure you run these separate different commands, which are different from ESM or different from CJS. And that's CommonJS and ECMAScript modules, which I should have said the first time. So all in all, this is a big pull request that touches every single part of the repo, which is why it's still a draft and I still have a bunch of to-dos for it. And then kind of once I got it to that to-do state, I switched over to our templating library, template OSS. And this is just an issue. It's just kind of like a spec for everything we would need to do and accomplish and blockers for adopting this pattern across any of other repos that we want. So as you can see, because we already have templating set up, I'm able just to list the changes to our templates. This would not be a good thing to add to when we were still going through the templating process. And then we review it and merge it. And like I said, I wrote that yesterday. So this is an example of a different pull request that made us test in NPM 10. When we released NPM 10, we wanted to kind of dog food, do our own testing and write all of our, test all of our modules in NPM 10, which, we use NPM to test NPM. It gets kind of complicated. But this helped us catch bugs, so we wanted to do it. So here's an example of reviewing and merging that in template OSS. And then we publish template OSS. And like I said, template OSS is used to publish template OSS, which helps us test NPM, which uses NPM. It's a big, long, recursive thing. And then we use, this is kind of the part about automating your automation. So then we use Dependabot to listen for changes to that published module and then apply those changes across all of our other repos. So we have Dependabot set to run every day, and Dependabot has hooks to run commands after it, so it applies our templating, linting, make sure everything is still good. If it's not good, the PR fails and a person does have to go in manually and fix it up. But this isn't Dependabot specific. A lot of these, any automation tool for automating your dependencies can kind of implement this pattern and make sure that you're getting some changes from any of your published packages. In this case for us, it's template OSS, which is kind of load-bearing for all of our processes. And then we just wait. Dependabot runs once a day. So, over the next day, the robots will bring in one change and then another change and then another change. And then, like I said, we have 83 of these. I had fun with these slides on the airplane. So the robots are taking over. Last time I gave this talk, someone dubbed it Terminalator, which is not my joke. It's a very good joke, but it's not mine. So kind of an overview of what I've talked about with template OSS so far. The first step was to create template OSS, kind of halfway between, step 0.5 is we use template OSS to build template OSS. And then in all of our packages, we installed it. We go into template OSS and say, we're going to add this feature, auto-publish, TypeScript support, dual CommonJS and ESM. And then we publish template OSS and kind of let the robots do the rest and profit. And just kidding, there's no profit in open source. No, just kidding again. So here's the big tagline. We use template OSS to tell Dependabot to watch for updates to template OSS, so Dependabot can apply template OSS updates everywhere. That's another thing that I have to read directly off the slides every time. And then I did give one a PAT tooling, and this is kind of just a bonus because anytime that I want to touch on, where anytime you set up robots to do a lot of work for you, robots are really good at doing a certain type of work that I'm really bad at. If you asked me to go apply these changes to all our repos, I'd forget 10 of them, I'd do 5 of them wrong, and it would not go well. But what I am good at is knowing when something goes wrong and applying the pattern matching that humans are good at. So like I said, often we have cases where template OSS can apply changes because the things that computers are bad at, knowing to change the name of a file somewhere that was in the wrong place. So we wrote our own tooling that we call staff tools, which is just, that's open source, but it's really only makes sense to run for internal folks, where you can kind of, people add new staff tools occasionally that say like fixing a known problem with template OSS, where you can run it and then it just does everything for you. But that's like, one-off scripts, things we run every once in a while. And just to make sure that the robots are still doing their job and we're not doing their job, which, there's AI talks here, we might flip the other way around soon. But at least get my chance now to tell the robots what to do. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I mentioned, if you have any questions about this, I missed the talks earlier. I'm not sure if we do any Q&A. I think I only have 1 minute left anyways, but if anyone has a question, I'd be happy to answer it. If not now, then on any of the socials provided. Or the best place to reach me is github.com/npm and open a pull request on any of those 70 repos, and I will get a notification for it. And then lastly, I think we're still hiring. So if any of this interests you, you can go to github.com/careers. That's it. Thank you.